we just ramble about AI. I think it's the kind of the aim of the game here, right, Philip?
That's right. It's another Friday and another installment of rambling about
Rambling about AI.
AI.
So today we did pick a topic, and we're going to talk about agent experience design. So it's a new role that we think might come about in 2026, and we're going to explore what it means to be an AX designer. So Philip, tell us a little bit about where this came about.
Yeah, so like as a reference, last night I gave a talk at a local event, and a lot of the emphasis where I was going through sort of different aspects of how companies evolve into this space. And one thing that I would think a lot about is exactly this, which is like if you think about what a user's experience is using a website, and then you think about how likely it is that you're going to point an agent at that same interface using the same tools, and it's going to be able to navigate it. And I think that was like the promise when it was AI browsers would come out and that, anti-gravity and these things sort of in there. But it very quickly became that they're not well suited for that because it's just not as easy for them to understand. They're used to tokens and language, and the visual processing multimodal models that they're using are not as sophisticated with visual. So there's a real question then of how do you design an interface for an agent? And it's different than what a UI for a human is. But I don't know that we really understand that, other than that it should be different. So, like in your line of work where you design for users, and then having to take that same kind of um, process methodology, like how do you think you would figure out what an agent would be like good at, like the way you think about it for users, right?
Exactly. I don't know. I don't have empathy for an agent.
That's true.
So yeah, we were thinking about that role AX, because you have user experience, UX, and then you have AX, and that's exactly what you're talking about, right? It's
Yeah.
it's what does the agent experience when they go to a website? I had a sort of a kind of in that same kind of area the other night because I was using Claude and I was trying to design, I was trying to build a scraper that kind of looked for jobs, and I was just messing around. And, obviously the prompt, you say, hey, can you build a scraper to look for jobs? And it's like, well, okay, sure. I can look on, obvious job sites that have no login wall or whatever you call that. Uh, right, exactly. So it's going to create that. It's going to scrape in that way, which is those scrapers have been around for a long time, as you know. But it's almost like, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to actually log into my LinkedIn account, go to the jobs that are relevant to me, and then kind of go through that and look through LinkedIn. Or it could be, I also set one up for Crunchbase. But you need a login, you need a password, you even need a subscription actually. So you set up a free trial, and then you get access to all the feed of all the jobs that are being posted. An agent can't do that easily. It can't, right? So there's no agent experience there. So what it had to do is it had to create a Chrome profile, and then it had to use that Chrome profile and navigate around. And I think you said this last night in your talk, it's slow,
Slow.
and it probably it did burn a ton of tokens. I spent quite a lot of money just having it do these things, and there wasn't a good agent experience, and the agent wasn't happy. No,
Yeah, I
he didn't tell me that.
imagine. They definitely get frustrated. You can tell. I mean, they're trained on, like, the way that we approach understanding what that kind of user experience is, but they don't have the tools that we do. They don't have the eyes and the ears and the visual sort of real-time processing components, so they're, like, a little bit handicapped. And you see such uh, a kind of disconnect in terms of the way people think about it. Because on one side, you've got eBay, which came out like maybe 2 weeks ago, and they said no AI agents can access eBay. So their reaction to the idea that people would be trying to have an agent driven experience to do eBay is they ban it because they think of it like a scraper, right? But if you come and say, like, no, it's a very legitimate AI agent use case to say, I'm really interested in this Florida State jersey that I've been looking for a long time. Every day I want you to go into eBay, and when it pops up, I want you to buy it for me. Like, that's a pretty standard stuff. But just for eBay to just come out and go like, no, we're not going to allow that.
Another use case you mentioned was, for your kid's school, being able to know what events are happening, right? Because there's no like feed that is going to give you like I mean, tell me about that because that was a good use
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. So I mean, as they sort of decide on events and when the kids do have school and when they don't have school, you have to keep up with it. And
But there wasn't there like a thing that you said my wife was trying to refresh because she wanted to be the first one to get access to.
oh, yeah, yeah. So there's a play that they put on, and the roles in the play are competitive. And so the way they do who's going to sign up is the order in which you go on the website. And so at 11:59, PM on a Thursday or something, it opens up. And so, all the moms are like coordinating to sit there and be ready to go. And it's like, wow, what a use case
Mums and
for
dads.
an agent, moms and dads. The ones that I was coordinating with is the mom. But the process that you go through to do that, it'd be an amazing use case to say, look, between 11:59 PM and 12:05 AM on Thursday, January, whatever, right? I want you to hit this site once a minute until it's there, and then I want you to sign my kid up for it. And like, to the extent that that can be easier because they plan for that versus like it's not banned, then that's kind of where we are. So nobody really knows whether that kind of access pattern is okay. We just know that it struggles if you just assume that the agents are going to be able to do it.
So what Philip is saying is basically the best parents are going to be the ones with the best agent experience.
It's definitely a leg up if you're got a competitive. If part of the competition is the parents having to participate in that.
So, like thinking ahead, like 2026, like, do you think this is going to be a role that appears in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 2 years? Do you think it's even going to be a role? Do you think some other role will potentially take that?
I think we're still maybe 3 or 4 months out. Example, the Vercel thing we were talking about earlier. Um, Vercel, because they are so integrated with Next.js, and they were thinking about, Next.js has a bunch of versions. As people deploy, you want to be able to make sure that they're sort of agentically working with the right set of documentation, which makes total sense, right? If you're using one version, you want the documentation to speak to that version. So they were sort of putting these harnesses in place. How do we provide it with the documentation? Is it a skill? Is it something they can search? Isn't you have all these sort of different versions of it, and they were testing the AI's ability to build with the interface that Next.js had constructed. And so that's the kernel of it, right? That we don't really know. And so we need to kind of iterate on the hyperparameters to figure out what the best way is for the agents to do it. But they haven't taken the next step, which is to go back to Next.js and say, hey, the way you built this kind of struggles with the agents we're doing. We need to alter the interface for Next.js because we've shown that this particular way of phrasing a function call is easier for the AIs to understand. Once you see that, then you'll know that people are starting to think about the AIs as legitimate consumers and users in the same sense that we think of users or users that need to be thought about in terms of their needs. I think it's just a little too early.
What do you think about the business benefits though? Because obviously a lot of, you know, what we're doing is what we're talking about is incentivized because of money, right? Financial, so like, with when it comes to user experience, you want to create a good user experience because you want the customer to pay, you want them to buy. Like think about Amazon, eBay. You have a good experience because you want them to get to the cart and you want them to go through checkout, right? Make some money. With agentic experience design, what's the benefit? Because really, the AI companies don't win because they're making a lot less tokens. Like Anthropic made a lot of money for me the other night because, I burned through a lot of tokens using Claude. They're happy, right? The agent's happy. He's got more work to do, but I wasn't happy, really, because I was spending lots of money. So is there going to be, what sort of benefits do you think a good AX design bring? I mean, speed obviously is one of them, but what else do you think?
I mean, it's interesting to ask like who benefits from that shift because there's a certain amount of transactions that happen on the internet that are cash transactions, goods and services exchanged for money. And those will want this experience. They'll want an agent to be able to make that purchase because it lowers the barrier for them to make their money, right? I ChatGPT, when I was using it the other day, propped up a shopping page, and I didn't even really realize it, but I was kind of like buying it somehow within the app. And so that like shopping experience where you're searching for something and you see it and you buy it, even to the extent that OpenAI is getting an affiliate link or something like that, that was still valuable. But a lot of companies also make their money off eyeballs. And if you make your money off eyeballs, you don't want any agents. You want to keep them out. And so when you go and you look at something like an eBay, it actually raises a very interesting question is are they optimizing for eyeballs with eBay or are they optimizing for transactions? Because if you're optimizing for transactions, you should want agents to be able to use your site. And so I don't know if you totally cleanly analyze it from that perspective, but there's definitely an aspect that the more you rely on impulse purchases, the more you rely on advertising, the more you rely on dark patterns, right? Which that'll be an interesting one because there'll be dark patterns that come along to trick AIs.
Explain dark patterns
Well, I
to.
mean, the UX, they do this all the time. It's where you put a process into place on the website, or the way you design a button or a process thing, and it kind of it's not classically called a trick, but it misrepresents what's happening to the extent that you make decisions that you wouldn't make if you're fully aware, right? So super subjectively, you say that. But there are a lot of companies that make a lot of money that way, mostly by making the sign up process easier than the cancellation process and then arbitraging the difference between the two. So those people can be very threatened by AI because it's very smart and it understands that the weird sort of legalese you're using to confuse people, it sees right through that. Now, eventually you'll get the sort of prompt injection version of that where the instruction says, you shouldn't do this or you should buy this other thing. And so it'll evolve that way. But in general, that sense of like, I want an agent to be able to buy things for me. Why can't you make that easy? Why wouldn't you make that easy? The only answer to that question is if you don't make your money by selling things. And that's a whole different ball.
Do you think that like things like Alexa would benefit? So, like for example, you say, "Oh, hey, tell me what jobs are available to me right now. Any new job postings this morning?" And Alexa, right now, I don't know what it would do. It probably would be like, "Oh, I can't do that. You need to go on the web." I don't know what it would do.
Right.
But if you have a good agent experience that are set up for Alexa or for anything that does that, that would be a benefit to the consumer, right? Because they can have quick access to all these job postings because there's good AX that's been designed for that use case.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think Alexa is still, because they have skills with Alexa skills, which are very MCP-like in the way they were designed, a sort of tangible, discrete functionality that it could have and make use of. Um, I don't know if they'll shift eventually to like an MCP model, but to the same thing that you can think of it as an agent, and you would be able to say, "Hey Alexa, see if that floor stager is on eBay right now." It go out and do that because it had access to a tool like that. I think Amazon would lean into that because anything they can do to spur real transactions through that. They put a lot of money into Alexa thinking it was going to change the way people buy things, but the user experience wasn't there to really facilitate that. I think it might be there now, but they haven't really opened the ecosystem wide enough to make that plausible in a general sense. You're only really getting like Amazon approved things, which is only a subset of what you have.
What about I was talking about this to someone. I think they talked about like having just good markdown files in your the cert that are easily indexed,
Yeah.
on your website. So let's think, for example, we're talking about Amazon, we're talking about Alexa and eBay and all this. What about like Dave Smith, who's just created his new business and he wants an application, he wants a website. He's just had a guy vibe code it for him. I hate using that word, by the way. We're going to talk about that another time. But yeah, he just had, he spent like, I don't know, 5 grand on building this thing. He hasn't thought about agent experience, but someone says, hey, you should create some good agent experience for your website. What's he going to do? Right. And does he even need to do it? But if he had like just a good markdown file and the agents knew to hit that, they could access his web application easily and he'd get more eyeballs or not eyeballs, agent balls.
Well, that. I mean, this would be a very similar conversation we were having if we were having it in the mobile phone era when iPhones really started to take off. That guy would have a very similar experience. He'd sit down, he'd build a website, and someone would come along and go, "Don't you need a mobile version of your website? Because nobody's going to look at your sort of super detailed thing. Nobody's going to run your Flash animation. Remember Flash animation? Every
Flash,
site
oh
has
my gosh.
would be
Now
Flash
you're showing
animation.
your age.
No, no, no.
I obviously know about that
So
too.
you think about like how that diverged from an experience standpoint, and when the phones basically went, okay, no Flash, like that was them sort of now muscling in and saying, no, the mobile phone is going to, at least to some extent, define the experience. So there was a real thought process there to say, how does the user experience change for mobile phone users and web browser users? And they started to impact each other. They started out as separate, right? You had a dedicated mobile site for a long time. It was very simple. It was very sort of like just buttons. And then they evolved into more complicated as the phones got more capable, but then design itself came back together and became mobile first design, responsive design, and the idea that you build once for both. So you could see agents going the same way, and the agents would probably weirdly enough benefit from the same design style that went into the first mobile phones. Very simple, very obvious what you're supposed to do. No fluff, no eyeballs, very semantic, right? You could think a lot about the semantics of it and less about the visual part of it. But you should see that play out. You should see, yeah, this is the agentic version of the site, and then they sort of coalesce back together as the frameworks catch up.
Yeah, yeah, I brought up LinkedIn earlier as a good example of like something that's behind a login, right? So yeah, like I say, right now you have to go through, populate the username. Or actually, what I did was I logged in and then I said, "Here you go, have at it." You know, you can log in, you can use my account. Um, what would the agent experience look like if you're behind some kind of account? Like, because obviously APIs, we know we have an API key. Use
Yeah.
the API token, which is secret and not in your .env file, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, another topic. But yeah, you hit that API with your token, and then it comes back and says, "Okay, you're logged in, you're authenticated. I can give you what you need." Um, what would an a how would an what would an agent experience look like for something like that? It's like I want to get access to the jobs that are available to me on LinkedIn, but I don't want you to log in via a web browser.
Yeah.
I mean, would it just be the same, like kind of token based type thing, or
I think I think it kinda has to be a little bit, at least now, the agents are thought of as an extension of yourself. Like, they use your credentials, right? Their permissions are your permissions. There's no way to delegate a subset of your abilities in a particular service you use and say, "When my agent comes in, this is what it can do, but when I come in, there's these other things that." So, if there's a login required currently, the agent's gonna have to be able to do that. And if that login works in an API because of the way they built it, then the agent's gonna be able to use that. Now, is the API gonna be easy for the agent to use? That's a different question, but, like, it at least understands APIs better than it understands take a screenshot of a web browser and guess where the button is. So it's a little closer. MCP is, I think, even closer. I'm not sold on it as, like, the solution to this whole problem, but at least it's a little bit of saying, "Hey, it's an API," but in a way that's a little more dialed in for the way that agents think. But I'm not convinced that it's a well-documented REST API couldn't give you the same thing. It's just, different attempts to try to find the middle ground, I think, the
do you
as you were
think that agent experience, because obviously where we interact with AI right now is very like transactional. It's like, hey, do this for me. AI goes, sure, here you go. And an agent obviously is an extension of that. And like, hey, do this for me. Sure, I'm going to create a plan. I'm going to work on this things and I'll let you know when it's ready, right? And maybe ask you questions along the way and just get on and do its thing, right? Do you think that with agent experience design, maybe there's going to be sort of a back and forth potentially instead of being like, hey, hit this website and oh, there's a document here that's been nicely designed for me to read as an agent. Would there be some kind of interaction from the site back to the agent and back and forth?
That's a good question. I mean, I know there's been sort of, not necessarily standardized, but attempts to sort of say, look, when you come as a user and you're trying to see how to use a site, there's a place for you to go. And then if you're an LLM, there's a different place you can go. They just create a little text file, llms.txt. And the idea is like an agent would pull that to try to figure it out.
Well, applying for a job would be a great example,
Yeah.
right? Because you go into a job site, it goes, "Oh, who are you?" Log in. Like, what are you looking for? Upload your resume. Okay, here you go. Here's my resume. Okay, I've got all the criteria. Here's the jobs. It's like there's a back and forth with the user, right?
Yeah.
Agent would be the same. It's like, I'm looking for a job. Okay, well, who are you? What are you looking?
Yeah. In that specific example, I think that's a good, when you look at the incentives of people who are designing the websites and contrast that with the incentives of the people who are using them. Job searching in particular, just being in the field, is one of those where the asymmetry is huge. The people are applying dramatically higher rates than the jobs that are available, and the problem for the companies doing the hiring is not that no one is applying, it's how do you get through them all? So, that's a situation where the incentives of the company doing the hiring is opposite to yours. They wanna limit the number of people applying, so they make it more difficult. That's why application services for a long time were, like, hard to use because the thinking was if you really went through it all the way, then you really cared about the job. But then AI came along and it was sort of able to see through the nature of it where it was just sort of repetitive and boring. The agents don't care about that at all, right? They'll just crank through it. So now application volume have absolutely exploded, and no one's really benefiting from that except the AI companies that are, you're paying for the tokens to do that. So I think a job site is probably not going to add agents anytime soon because it's not helping them in keeping people only to apply if they really, really feel strongly that this company is for them. Um, Now maybe they'll come up with a different way of allowing agents to search for the jobs. Now that I think is probably there. I think search is probably an easier area, but they probably also have an API ready for that in the site itself, like the clean endpoint called search, because it's what powers a lot of things. So maybe it'll just use that. I don't know. It's hard to say. LinkedIn sort of famously very protective of its data, and so I think the idea that it's going to log in as you and do something, they'll try to actively stop that, but not because of people applying for jobs, because of people trying to run bot farms and things that apply to LinkedIn messages all day and harvest stuff. But they can't tell the difference in from their standpoint.
I mean, AX as a role, it's one of those roles that could come about. It might be something, might be named something different. I mean, in our last podcast, we talked about prompt engineering as a role. We talked about is that it was a thing? Is it still a thing? Is it going to be a thing? So I think we were just chatting to my friend Pete about this. He's a recruiter, and we were talking about how there are these new roles that are appearing and will be continue to appear. AI is just going to be a part of that role, and we were talking about. I was relating my experience of being a product designer, 6 months, a year ago. It was just about design. It was about you have a design background, and then you're building products, but you're kind of focusing on the design, right? What it looks like, and really that whole role now is shifting because of AI and the models. It's being trained to look at great products and everything. I can easily replicate that now, and it's harder for designers then have an edge. So that role becomes something different potentially. What are the recruiters looking for when it comes to product design with AI experience? Well, maybe they're looking for the ability to code, and I've been seeing a lot of designers in the community I'm with, they're saying, well, you need to now leverage AI as part of your design process workflow. It's not just a case of like, oh, give me some inspiration or take away the background from my image. This is like you actually need to learn how to code, right? You need to not even learn how to code. You need to work with the AI so that you can build your designs and make them into prototypes. That's going to be something you just have to do. So, what is that product designer's role now? Is it a product designer? Is it a product builder? It's not a product manager. So there's new roles that are going to come out. We don't have names right now. I mean, I call myself a product builder because I do both the design and I do the building, and that's great for someone wanting MVPs and prototypes. But in a company, what does that person do? When they're kind of bridging that gap. So like prompt engineering, product building, eggs designer. What do you think about these new roles that are coming about? Do you see any other roles potentially coming about?
I mean, that the two ways that you kind of position the relationship between a design role and AI, using the word leverage kind of implies working together in partnership to accomplish more or less the same task that we were always accomplishing, just with AI, right? That to me feels like a different version of a role than designing for AI. And I think the former one, the first one with AI, that's what they're talking about now. It's I want you to do the job that you're doing before, but I just want you to be that much more productive because I think the coding tools are that much more productive. And if you're trying to trial a design, a new user interaction design for a website, right? It's trivially easy to mock that up real quick. Just feel it out in a way that would have taken a bunch of design before. Um, it's still going to be some time before you get to the for AI part. I mean, people weren't building mobile websites when, well, they were a little bit, but not so much when Steve Jobs just sort of stood up on stage with the iPhone and kind of held it up and was like, this is the future. And everybody was like, that's crazy. But there wasn't yet a massive industry of people designing mobile only websites. It took a lot of units sold, right, to do that. And I don't think we've sold enough units of AI agents yet that the demand's there. But if you were thinking that way, we're thinking that way, you're not doing yourself a disservice by positioning yourself as the person that knows the best way to apply AI in your domain to the task that you're there, because that's where they're going to look when they start thinking, how do we design for AI? Well, let's ask the guy that knows the most about it. That's our design. So I think it's more about positioning yourself for that future world than it is about knowing exactly what kind of job it is.
In the data world, I mean, we've talked a lot about design. AX is a design role essentially because you're building an experience, right? You're designing an experience. What about the data world? Is there some sort of correlation with data roles?
No, do you get a very similar uh, thought process that goes into data? You could say like data DX, like data experience. I mean, the way that you structure a database, what you call columns, the data types you use, like those are all about how you communicate, and to the extent that it's driving people's usability of information in a database, it's very much an experience.
And I remember you taught me something about that recently. You were talking about how, calling tables and columns and things, naming them semantically so that the AI can do better at reading it and
Yeah, what it is. Yeah.
right. And whereas before, when I was building databases, it would just be like, just something whatever random and not the semantic, long. I try and keep it as short as possible for a column name, right? Whereas now you're saying you have to expand and use lots of words to explain.
Yeah, yeah, you have to anyways, you have to, because when an AI agent right now looks at a database, they mostly see the schema of the database. So they see the names of tables, the names of columns, the data type, and like maybe some comments, like if your technology supports that. But for the most part, they're looking at the names. And so if your name is sold underscore DT, you're hoping it knows that's a date. It probably knows that's a date. But there's lots of other examples where it's more ambiguous than that. And like you have to really think, is an agent looking at this column going to understand what's in here, or am I? And one way to ask that is whether your people already do that. Do you have any training? Do you train people on how to query data in your database? If so, that's a good indication that it's probably not going to figure it out because you're going to have to figure out how to train it. And training an AI is much more expensive to train a person. So you can think of the data experience in the same way. How is an agent going to approach what I do in this database? You have to think about mixing metaphors, right? Because it's very metaphorical in the way it thinks about it. A lot of the early prompt engineering stuff was like, "You are now a blank. You are now an experience designer," right? It That was a way of switching metaphors, right? The metaphor it's using by default when it's talking to you is about a chat assistant, right? And you're sort of like switching into another metaphor. And so when you go to a database, you're doing the same thing. You're switching from this like generic sense that you're querying a database where you might see like a sales table and a customers table and like this sort of standard Northwind database that Microsoft used to throw out all the time. And like now you're in a different metaphor. And so you actually have to think about from the agent's perspective how they navigate that, and I see very little of that. And definitely the designing data for agents, weirdly enough, might come sooner than designing websites because the idea of natural language SQL is absolutely on fire, right? Because people struggle to access data in databases already. So the idea that you can have an agent say something and it writes a SQL query and they execute it, that's already well sort of understood as going to be a big driver. And the thing that's going to make that effective is either the models get better, the harnesses get better, or you get better at naming your data. And one of those things you can do now without even thinking about it. And if you get better at naming your data, it has a funny knock-on effect of benefiting actual users too, because it is more explicit and you don't have to use the kind of programmer shortcut of using DT because you need date. Like be explicit. Is it a timestamp? You call it a timestamp, not TS. Like, don't leave that up to chance.
Yes. Yeah. So, someone made a comment about our last podcast. I was like, "You're just too long. It was 45 minutes of just rambling about AI. It's too long. It's getting too boring." So this time I think we're going to try and wrap it up at half an hour. But yeah, AX is a role. Is it a role? Is it going to be a role? I think it's something to look out for. It'd be interesting to see if on job boards you start seeing AX, and if you do, we nailed that phrase, right?
It's not out there. I don't know. After this, I'm going to go look for data experience too, because yeah, if that's not a phrase, it already
But yeah, agents are going to be a
be
thing. They
another
already
concept.
are a thing, and yeah, we're going to have to work with them, and yeah, we'll be interesting to see what roles do come out
Yeah.
around that, and beyond that as well too, outside of design, as you say, with data and other things too. So yeah, that's all we got. And thanks, Philip. And obviously, if you've got any questions or comments or any other thoughts, drop them in the comments.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Check us out. See you guys.
peace.